Ας περάσουμε τώρα στην επόμενη μας συνέντευξη, στην οποία φιλοξενούμε τον δόκτωρ Andrew Sergis και στην ουσία είναι η συνέχεια προηγούμενης συνέντευξης, όπου αναφέρεται στις τελευταίες εξελίξεις που αφορούν στην καταπολέμηση του ιού. Συγκεκριμένα μας περιγράφει τις μεθόδους που χρησιμοποιεί αυτή τη στιγμή η επιστημονική αλλά και η ερευνητική κοινότητα ώστε να βρεθεί το πολυπόθητο φάρμακο. Ας παρακολουθήσουμε όλα αυτά τα ενδιαφέροντα θέματα που συζητιούνται σε αυτή τη συνέντευξη και στην συνεργάτιδά μας Άντα Μουράτη.
Κυρίες και κύριοι, καλησπέρα σας. Καλησπέρα από το Hellenic TV. Καλώς ήρθατε σε ακόμα μια συνέντευξη. Σήμερα λοιπόν φιλοξενούμε τον κύριο δόκτωρ Andrew Sergis σε μια συνέχεια της προηγούμενης συνέντευξης, ο οποίος θα μας ενημερώσει για τις τελευταίες εξελίξεις σχετικά για την καταπολέμηση του COVID-19. Dr. Andrew Sergis, welcome. Welcome to the Hellenic TV.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, I think I will start our conversation if you could summarize our last interview, just in a simple way, few words. How does the virus attack the human cells and how does it regenerate inside the body?
Yes. Okay, so viruses in general are like particles with information, we call it genetic information, like all cells have, all living cells have, like what we're made up of. But these cells cannot thrive by themselves independently. They have to thrive within other cells. And they're much smaller than our cells. They're much smaller than animal or plant cells. And indeed, they're smaller than bacterial cells. And bacterial cells, in turn, are smaller than our cells. So they're quite small particles. And what they do is they infect cells. It could be plant or animal cells. In this particular one, the coronavirus is specifically an animal cell, specifically has actually transferred to as mutated so that it infects humans, and it came from other animals, so now it's infecting us. So what it does is it latches onto the cell surface. That's the first stage. The second stage is it injects its information, for example the DNA, inside the host cell that it attacks, in other words our cells, and then the DNA sends instructions to our cells to make more of its genetic material and more of its protein. So eventually, inside our cells, many of these virus cells are being reproduced, and eventually our cells die, and as a result, many of these cells are released into the body. In this particular way, on average, every person can infect something like around almost 3 people. This is why the virus spreads very rapidly.
Please outline the international efforts so far to produce a vaccine for COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes. So basically what we have is that various efforts have been made, and the World Health Organization has in fact coordinated these efforts. Now, as COVID-19 has rapidly spread around the world, there has been a mad scramble to find a vaccine. And many millions of pounds and dollars have been pledged towards finding an effective vaccine. Now, working on a vaccine is very difficult because of the fact that obviously safety measures have to be followed stringently. And we've got to make sure that the vaccine is effective. So we have to go through clinical trials. First of all, before we do the clinical trials, we have to go through animal trials to see if it works in animals similar to us, particular animals such as mammals, which have similar physiology like chimps to us. And then once it's effective, then it has to go through clinical stages. And there are 2 main clinical stages that the vaccine needs to pass through. And the first one is the preclinical stage, which involves making sure that, like I said, it's safe and it's effective. We call this efficacy, in other words, the effectiveness of the virus. And then the clinical stage where we should try it with volunteers and patients to see if it actually works. And of course, the next strategy is the mass production of the vaccine, once we see on a small scale that it works with volunteers and patients. And of course, that means we have to persuade major companies to spend millions of pounds to manufacture it. And this is why it could take up to 18 months before the vaccine is produced. And because of obviously the enormous effort, money and time spent to make the vaccine, there are other strategies now that we're thinking of to treat coronavirus. And these strategies that we're adopting involve using drugs and treatments. And the drugs that we're using, we call them repurposing drugs. In other words, the drugs that have been successful in previous years in treating other conditions like HIV and other respiratory conditions. And these drugs now are being tested to see if they're effective for the virus. And for example, the drugs that we can include are the anti-malarial drugs. And for example, the drugs which, like chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, are two candidates that we're trying to test to see if they work against the COVID-19 virus, the coronavirus that we are afflicted with. Other drugs include the ones that have been treated for Ebola, the relatively recent outbreak of Ebola, and this particular drug, Remdesivir, has had a good success in treating people with Ebola. So we're going to try it with the COVID-19 virus. And there's a combination of drugs which have been used successfully to treat HIVs, the anti-HIV drugs, lopinavir and ritonavir, which come under the brand name of Kaletra. So there's various strategies that we're adopting now because it takes time to develop a vaccine, like I said, 18 months. And for example, steroids, which may provide beneficial dampening effects, so they could dampen the symptoms of COVID-19 for those who suffer from those severe symptoms of the disease. And there's interferons. There's alpha and beta interferons. Interferons, which are involved in the body's natural defense system, can be made in the lab by organic synthetic chemists, such as myself. And there is some evidence of the beneficial effect of these in animals infected with the MERS virus, which is the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome virus, which started back in 2012. And there have been various beneficial effects by injecting animals with interferon, and also people who have suffered from MERS virus. They've been treated successfully with interferons, especially interferon beta. So we're trying to use interferon beta to see if there's a good efficacy, in other words, effectiveness in treating COVID-19 patients. Other strategies that we're adopting are the convalescent plasma. That is to say that when a person has recovered from the COVID-19 virus, his or her body produces antibodies. These are proteins which fight the infection. This is how a vaccine works. Once you a person gets naturally infected with a virus, and then he or she produces these antibodies to fight the particular virus. So that person who's recovering from the actual virus, who's successfully survived it, has natural antibodies against it. So we can actually extract that plasma of the person that's survived the COVID-19 virus and use it to treat patients with COVID-19. Other strategies include the antiviral antibodies. Several companies are developing novel, what we call monoclonal antibodies to bind to and neutralize the COVID-19 virus. So there's different strategies that we're adopting, and drugs which have been previously successful in other diseases. So until we produce a vaccine. Again, the vaccine is underway. There's major efforts which are being coordinated, like I said, by WHO, the World Health Organization. And here at the University of Oxford, we're collaborating with other academics globally, worldwide, in particular Germany, France, and Italy, in order as a worldwide effort to try and produce a vaccine. But it certainly may not be possible by the end of the year, probably sometime next year. But the target is we're trying to rapidly avoid red tape so that we can make it as fast as possible. So we're hoping that if it's not by the end of this year, it'll be sometime next year.
Do you think the vaccine is going to be like the flu jab?
Yeah, so the way the actual flu vaccine works is that the flu vaccine stimulates the body's immune system to make antibodies, like all vaccines do. Antibodies are proteins, like I said, that recognize and fight off germs, such as viruses, which invade the blood. Once exposed to the flu virus, after you've had the vaccine, your immune system will recognize the virus, immediately produce antibodies against it. And it may take up to 10 to 14 days for your immunity to build up defense against the disease. People have had a flu vaccination every year. The antibodies that protect you from the flu, because they decline, they don't last long enough, they wear out. And also new strains of the flu virus come up. The flu virus undergoes mutations. So every year, new strains of the flu virus develop. So we have to produce a vaccine against those. So what happens? The World Health Organization, WHO, at the beginning of the year and also around February each year, the World Health Organization assesses the strains of the new flu virus because it mutates every year, and then it decides which particular, there's several possible new strains that are produced every year. So the World Health Organization around February time decides which vaccine for which particular strain to produce, and that becomes ready by later, or by the late year, around midwinter time, where the flu virus predominates, and therefore it's a coordinated effort by WHO to decide which particular vaccine to use every year. But it protects, the flu vaccine protects us against 4 types of flu viruses, and manufacturers produce the flu vaccines in accordance with the recommendations of WHO. And it does work. I mean, it's a virus. The COVID-19 virus is a virus similar to that of flu, basically, but it's more related to 2 kinds of viruses, which in general we call them coronaviruses. And these include the SARS virus. We call it SARS coronavirus, because the reason why we call it SARS coronavirus is because these coronaviruses include SARS and MERS viruses, and SARS stands for severe acute respiratory syndrome, and that emerged back in 2002 in China. And we've got the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, that's MERS virus, back in the Middle East around 2012. And these are related to the coronavirus, or what we call COVID-19 virus, that is present now. And because they're all related, it's possible that we can produce a vaccine already. Unfortunately, no effective vaccines have been produced for the MERS virus, and we're hoping that the developments that have been done in the past will proceed and speed up the development of a vaccine for this specific one, COVID-19.
So we hear, I think, more what is the prepare for the production action about the COVID-19. What are the next steps?
Okay. The next steps, like I said, the more immediate steps at the moment, unfortunately, there's no real effective treatment for COVID-19. Unfortunately, that's the stark reality. There is no drug which is effective against COVID-19 at the moment. So we cannot treat the actual the virus directly. We cannot inhibit it or reduce it directly, but we can only use drugs to treat the symptoms, unfortunately, at the present moment. These drugs and treatments that I outlined a moment ago are ones which are, again, in the pipeline that we're trying to produce that directly attack the virus and inhibit it or reduce it. At the moment, we haven't produced them yet. Again, they're in the pipeline, hopefully within the space of a few months, much quicker than the vaccine that will produce within the space of 18 months. So because the vaccine would take 18 months, these particular potential drugs I outlined a moment ago would take maybe within 6 months. So it's more quicker situation. But with regard to at the present time, we don't have any treatments to treat the actual virus directly, but only treatments for the symptoms. So we're looking at a space of 6 months. Hopefully we have treatments. And the vaccine would take longer than that.
Very well. Would you like to say something to our viewers, any advice or something they should be more protecting?
Yes, yeah, it is important that we maintain social distancing. Always, whenever, for about an hour, you go out to the park or whatever, when you, again, keeping social distancing, when you get home, make sure you wash your hands with soap and water. And if you don't have soap and water, you're going out, maybe an alcohol-based sanitizer. And if you sneeze, make sure you sneeze in your handkerchief or in your elbow. So make sure, because there have been studies, computer modeling, where it's found that once you sneeze in the air, the virus spreads rapidly by diffusion to great distances. So it's easy to infect other people. So it's, if you have it. So it's important to try and sneeze in your elbow, maintain social distancing. We're looking at about at least 2 meters from other people, and always wash your hands with soap and water.
Dr. Andrew Sergis, thank you very much. Thank you very much for answering our question today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.